Would you tell me a little bit about yourself?
Yes. So my name's Carly Lancaster. I'm a fifth-year graduate student at Emory University in the labs of Drs. Ken Moberg and Anita Corbett. Hoping to graduate soon. And I'm a first-gen college student.
Awesome. I'm going to ask you a series of questions kind of about your experience as a first-gen college student. So to start us off, what was undergrad like for you as a first-gen student?
I had a great experience in undergrad. So I'm from Charleston, South Carolina, and I went to the University of South Carolina in the Columbia area. And I really enjoyed college for the most part. I will say I'm also the oldest sibling, so I didn't have anyone go to college before me. So there were definitely some things, I guess, that I wouldn't say I wasn't prepared for, but I was surprised by.
What were some of those things?
I guess it was the intensity of going into a STEM undergraduate, a STEM major in undergrad. I didn't realize what 17 hours, 18 hours really entailed, and the amount of hours of studying that would entail in order to, get really good grades. And so I guess it was, I was prepared but surprised. But other than that, I think my family was really supportive, but had no clue what I was doing or what was going on. So.
And that's a challenge of itself.
Absolutely, they were like, "Oh, what are you doing?" And you start talking about it. It's a different language, so there does become a bit of a language barrier as you grow in your education, for sure.
What about the transition to graduate school? Have you felt any particular challenge that kind of might arise as somebody being the first to go to the college in your family?
Like in graduate school specifically?
Yeah.
I think it would be something. I was very fortunate to have parents who, like I said, and family who was extremely supportive. Even though I think some of my family still thinks I'm in medical school, but to them, a doctor's a doctor, although I can't give medical advice, which they think I can. But I will say I think that I was fortunate to be in a lab in undergrad, and so I think in that aspect, I walked into graduate school at least somewhat understanding of what the expectations would be. But there is a level of, I think now that I'm looking for jobs, there is a level of, wow, okay, I don't have connections that some people have. And so it's really about kind of building those connections for yourself, and I guess now really putting yourself out there, which is for the first time, which is a challenge, but also an opportunity,
Yeah.
I think. So in some ways it's a bit of a character builder, but it builds good character. So.
Yeah, for sure. You're building and activating a network, and
yeah, right. Which it's great for people who have that network, and you can rely on those people that have the network to help you. But building your own network is definitely a challenge in of itself.
What made you realize you wanted to go to college and then pursue STEM in college?
Great question. So my entire life, my parents said, we didn't go to college, so we expect you to go to college. And provided the financial ability, we want, you have to get a scholarship and you've got to go. So after taking the SAT many, many times, I finally got a score that allowed me to get a scholarship to go to college that paid for most of it, not all of it, but most of it, which was a huge help, not only to me, but to my family. And then so I guess in that respect, like I always knew I wanted, or like almost had to go to college. It was like an expectation of me. And then as for graduate school, I had always thought that I wanted to go to medical school. Well, I guess, hold on, your question was what? Your question was, did I want to go in, how did I know I wanted to do STEM undergrad?
Yeah, we could absolutely skip over that kind of
No,
question.
so I originally went to USC, and on my application I said that I wanted to go into political science, and then I took an AP biology class not in undergrad, in high school, and my teacher asked me, she said, what are you majoring in? What did you decide to major in? And I said political science, and she said, I think you should go into biology. And I don't know if it was in all honesty, I don't know if it was the positive reinforcement that I got from her that kind of made me decide to change my mind. But I did really well in my biology class, and I loved my teacher, and I loved the subject, and I think that having her and other positive STEM mentors when I was in high school really is what made me ultimately decide to go into like biology, biochemistry when I was an undergrad.
And then what made that transition from undergrad to graduate school, because you can do so much with a biology degree. What really made you want to pursue your PhD?
Yeah, so like I said, I originally thought I wanted to be a doctor just because like doctor, lawyer sounds nice, and I think at that point in my life it was more of I can do it, so why not? And then I went to a seminar. I had to take a seminar class when I was in undergrad, and I never really paid attention in my seminar class until this one woman came in, and she was really funny and really brought it down to our level, like my level as an undergrad, and she was talking about she broadly studied ovarian cancer and used models for disease, for cancer really in particular. But anyway, I remember really enjoying that talk, and I went up and chatted with her afterwards, and I was like, hey, if you're looking for anyone to just help you out in the lab, I'd love to just get some experience, because I heard that if you want to go to med school, you have to get into a lab. Well, once I was in the lab, I don't know, it just felt right. I was like, I really enjoy this, and this part of science, and in that moment, I guess, not moment, but in those years that I was in that undergraduate lab, learned a lot about myself and learned that a PhD was more up my alley, or a graduate school was more up my alley.
So I hear you talk about the challenges of being a first-gen student, in that when others have a network, they can kind of explore these ideas or at least introduce these possibilities. Whereas without, as a first-gen, you really are reliant on really good mentors or teachers to kind of step in.
Absolutely.
Have there been others outside of your kind of science teacher that said, hey, drop the politics, just do science? Have there been any other kind of standout mentors throughout your career that have really helped you get here?
Like outside of high school, or like
anywhere? Yeah. So
if I'm being honest, like outside of an academic environment, I would say no. And not that they haven't mentored me in other ways, but in my scientific journey, I would say no. I haven't really had anyone outside of academia mentor me in my scientific career. And it would have been nice to have someone outside of like a professional relationship to mentor me in that way, but ignorance is bliss, so it's fine. But I will say that like academic mentors I've had have really shaped my career. Like my undergraduate mentor specifically, her name is Laura Jenkins. She, I mean, if it weren't for her, I wouldn't be sitting here now. You know, she's the one who really inspired me and made me realize how much I loved science and took a chance on me. It's a lot of hoping that people will take a chance on you despite the fact that you don't have any connections. And having people in your life that will take a chance on you is more valuable than you realize in the moment and more valuable than they will ever realize. So
I love that. So I'm a first gen student too, and so much of what you say is just, when I look back on my career, I don't reflect it as a value that I was bringing to the person, but really that somebody took a chance on me.
yeah.
And it's an interesting mindset and an interesting approach because, you know, you don't have that network.
Right.
In that like vein of taking chances on people, how are you using your past experiences to try to make science and academia, or even your career path if you're leaving or considering leaving, more equitable and inclusive to people who don't have everything that we didn't have as first-gen students?
Yeah, I mean, I think that as a graduate student right now, if I'm being honest, I don't feel like, at this moment in time, I have a lot of power to impact change on that level. With the exception of inspiring, like, undergraduate students that I mentored, be like, hey, like, you know, no big deal if you're first gen too, like I am, like we all, like you're capable of getting here, I got here, like, it's definitely not impossible. I think at that level I can at least try to, I don't know if inspire is the right word, but like, you know, at least try to comfort those who feel anxiety about being first gen, or about like not knowing the language because they didn't grow up in that language. You know, it's all a learning process, and no matter where you start, you can get there. It might be a little more difficult for you, it probably will be, but you can definitely get there with time and patience. And then I hope that one day, I don't plan on staying in academia, but I hope that one day, you know, I'm in a position maybe of leadership where with my past experiences I will, I don't know, maybe not pass judgment on those who come from places that aren't scientifically rich, or places, or, you know, homes that never spoke about science, or not science in particular, but maybe STEM in general.
Yeah.
You know, and just like learn that like now it would be my turn to take a chance on somebody and give somebody an opportunity, you know, to pay it forward, like others did for me. So hopefully I can mentor others in that way as I progress in my career.
Awesome. So thinking back upon your journey, and the barriers that you faced, you know, the kind of take a chance, like, do you have one really good piece of advice that you could give to another first generation student who maybe kind of wants to try academia but doesn't have the language, feels intimidated? What's the one thing you would tell that person to just really encourage them to pursue their dream?
That's a good question. I don't know, it might sound really corny, but like at some point you have to like find a way to quiet the imposter syndrome that's in your head. Imposter syndrome is so real, and it's real at every stage of your career. Like I always thought that I'd wake up one day and it would just be gone. Like I would, I learned this thing, or I achieve this goal, and all of a sudden the imposter syndrome disappears, and it really just doesn't. It's about your relationship with yourself and really learning that you can do anything, and the resources are out there and available, and as long as you really push and really try to take opportunities that are presented for you. You can do it. You absolutely can. It's about believing in yourself, really. As cheesy as that sounds, it really is. Quieting the imposter syndrome and believing that you can do it, even though that little voice in your brain says that you're not going to. You just have to pretend you don't hear it and keep going.
Yeah, awesome. All right, what was the hardest part of your journey, Carly?
Wow.
Maybe in kind of the undergrad transitioning to the graduate student as a first gen, what was like one of the barriers that was kind of like shocking and surprising? I remember, I didn't know I had to take the GRE.
Oh yeah. I was like, I have to take a GRE? What's that?
I was like, I know MCATs are needed for medical school, but graduate school needs a test too. And I found myself scrambling. So did you have any of those kind of learning gaps where if you had the language, you would have found it a little bit easier to navigate?
Yeah. I would say that when it came to actually applying for graduate school, I don't know if this was necessarily a challenge, but something that I realized later on is that there were a lot more opportunities for me than I took. For instance, I only applied to like 4 places, and 3 of them were schools that I knew I was I knew I was a shoo-in because I was afraid to take a chance. And I kind of had this preconceived notion that because my family didn't have money and because I didn't have a family member that could, write a letter for me to go here, or because, I felt like I wasn't enough to go to a nicer school. And fortunately I got into Emory, and I was surprised, which was in hindsight kind of sad, because as I have gotten older and I've looked back, I've realized that I could have, not that Emory's not great, I love Emory. It's just that there were a lot more opportunities out there than I took advantage of. And I wished that I had known that then. But as for, I guess the biggest challenge was just, like I said, it was the challenge was just overcoming the language barrier into academia. I didn't grow up around parents that talked about DNA. So overcoming that language barrier was a lot. But I guess, you just kind of dive in and you have to stop caring about what other people think of you, because a lot of that's just in your head. People aren't thinking about you,
Yeah.
People aren't thinking about you. That's all in your head.
I know, it's strangely a narcissistic thought, even though
Yeah.
it doesn't feel like that.
Yes, absolutely. I'm like, oh gosh, they're gonna hear, I would interview with PIs to be in their lab. I would get so nervous that I would out myself as someone who wasn't worthy of being there, or who, wasn't a scientist because I couldn't speak the language.
Yeah.
And it wasn't true. And if it was, that wasn't someone who I wanted to work for anyway, right?
Yeah. So you're at the tail end of your graduate career. What is the best or coolest experiment that you've done so far? And as you kind of wrap things up, what is one thing you're really looking forward to kind of putting a cherry on top of your graduate work?
Yeah. So the coolest thing I've done is also probably, it's funny that the dichotomy here, but the coolest thing I've done is also the thing that really was also kind of the worst part of graduate school. So I did an experiment. I won't get into the hairs of it, but I I was trying to do this experiment that we were piloting in the lab that we had never done before, and it was this relatively new technique that had only very recently been published on. And long story short, after months and months and months of struggling with the technique and feeling like I was never going to be able to figure it out, I was able to get it to work enough to get it published. And although it was the absolute bane of my existence, and at the time I felt like I hated it and I never wanted to see it again, I kind of look back and I think that it's a note of like pride for me, where I'm like, okay, I didn't even believe that I could do that, and even though it took me 2 years and it definitely shaved years off of my life, I look back and I feel very proud. And then with full transparency, I never got it to work again. So that's just science, and I think that helped me mature and realize, it's not me. It's not me. I got it to work, and it was a character building experience for sure. But
yeah, you can only control the controllables, and sometimes
you can't control the rest of it, and it is what it is. And learning that it wasn't me, and I'm proud of that too.
Yeah. All right, last question to kind of wrap it up. What is something that you do for fun?
Ooh, I love hiking. Maybe that's cheesy too, but I love to hike and just get outdoors and go for a walk, and then the world around me my environment changes. The world around me is much different. It kind of helps me get back to basics a little bit. I also like yoga. Anyone who doesn't like to exercise traditionally should do yoga. That helps so much with anxiety and stress too. So
just able to let it go and leave it all on the mat?
Yeah, or try. I'm not really able to do that very well, but we're trying.
What is your favorite yoga pose?
I like it's called Shavasana, or dead man's pose. You just lay on the mat.
Also my favorite.
Yeah. It's also called about to take a nap.
Yeah. It's at the very end,
yeah.
And you're just tired, and you just get to lay down and call it an exercise. That is the dream.
Right.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time, Carly.
Yeah.
I really appreciate it.
Thank you.